Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I am going to be joined by Mark Stanton. He is the president and general manager at Elokon Group. And Elokon Group is bringing safety tech to the warehouse in multiple different offerings surrounding forklifts in particular and material handling equipment, and being able to bring a more safety-focused aspect into the warehouse and allowing your operators to operate more safely with some great tools that they are focused on. So we're going to learn more about that today. And we're also going to dive into a little bit around just the safety tech world in general within the warehouse. And we're going to talk to a little bit about ROI around safety and how to look at that from that perspective, which sometimes can be a little challenging. So we're going to dive into that with Mark today. So Mark, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate the invitation.
Absolutely. Happy to get you on here, and always happy to talk about safety in the warehouse too, which I think is such an important thing. First thing that people should be thinking about when it comes to the warehouse, which can be a potentially dangerous place regarding all the equipment that we have running around there and all those different aspects. So why don't you kind of give us just a brief overview of the Elokon Group and what it is that you all do and where your focus lies?
Yeah, happy to. So Elokon has been around for about 38 years, head office in Germany, near Hamburg in Germany. We're about 130-ish employees at the moment. I run the Elokon Inc. organization, which is for North America, US, Canada, and Mexico, particularly. There's 11 of us in the team as we speak at the moment, growing to about 16 by the end of this year. So, we had a very, very good 2023, and 24 started off very well. I hope it continues. It's still early days, but it's always good to get a head start on these things. And really, the company, as I say, has been around for 38 years, and we've been centered, really all focused on our products and technology around the safety, as you mentioned before, really to do with material handling equipment, MHE, whether that's warehousing, distribution, manufacturing, really anywhere that utilizes material handling equipment, and generally speaking, where people are in the same or close vicinity to that MHE. You mentioned it earlier on. It can be a little unsafe on occasions, and all of our products really are centered around trying to improve and increase the level of safety, both on the fork trucks, if I can just use fork trucks as an example for MHE, but also the pedestrians, the people that are working in that environment.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think that's such a great thing to focus on, as I mentioned there earlier. And, it's so important too, to be able to take a look at that. And as we see, it's one thing, I think, to, preach safety within an operation, right? Which I think is necessary, have signs up reminding people, make sure you stop here with the forklifts, for example, or, retraining, having those trainings robust and things like that. But we have, a lot of technology available to us as well in the world that we could utilize in the warehouse. And you guys are kind of bringing that to the warehouse itself. So tell us, I guess, from your perspective, how important is it to not just have those safety programs where you're focused on training and, visual aids, signage, vocal reminders, things like that, but how important is it to also bring tech into that safety culture that you have within the warehouse?
It's a very interesting question, and candidly, I think both of them are equally important. You can have all the best tech in the world, but if you don't implement the protocols and procedures and the management and supervision around that tech, there's no guarantee that it's going to work or improve anything. Equally importantly, having all the passive safety systems in, whether that's signage, as you said before, or barriers and such like, is all very well and good, but it can only go so far, right?
Right.
And I'm sure you've been in many warehouses and manufacturing plants, etc. As have I. They're becoming more and more, technically advanced. Greatly more digitization, automation. People are still in the mix of all this thing. It has to be on many occasions. And so what we're seeing is really a much greater drive to combine both the passive and the active where appropriate. Active systems, and that's the technology that we sell and others, are not the panacea to everything. All right, they're not the silver bullet. I wish they were, but a combination of the two can really reinforce a company's initiatives and drive towards 100% safety. That should be everybody's goal. Right. And our technology can help deliver some of those promises and some of those achievements to those organizations. And unfortunately, you read it in the press, whether it's in the papers or some of the trade magazines. I hate to say it, but the level of accidents, some of them are very, very significant and severe, as you all know. Really, I don't see that diminishing too much. And that's just my perspective. I don't have the stats to prove it one way or the other. So I think a combination of that tech and the passive systems, as I said before, is very, very important. I also think that companies like ourselves, whether it's Elokon or others, our goal and our objective needs to be to bring that tech in a way that makes the most sense and delivers the highest benefit, whether that's from a cost perspective. You mentioned ROI earlier on. That's something we'll discuss maybe a little later. Yeah. But bringing those elements together and educating organizations, not just the health and safety people, because they're very well educated mostly, right, but maybe some of the senior management and CEOs and others as to the avoidance and the cost of avoidance against waiting for hopefully not, but a catastrophe to happen. It's not a good way of running a business, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such a great point there. And I love that you said it goes kind of hand in hand, the passive and then the tech side of things. And I love the point that you said there, where you said, the passive can only take you so far. Right. And, and I think part of that too is, as we see, and, we see it too in our daily lives as we're driving our cars, right? We don't necessarily follow all the rules exactly, right? I mean, the sign says it's 65 miles per hour and, we're doing 75, 80, right? And that's like kind of the norm. So, I mean, the same thing I think kind of happens where either, it's like, okay, I see the sign, but I know my way around. I know what I'm doing. And, or maybe like I've just become a little complacent and, it's just kind of like, I'm just going through the motions and not necessarily as aware as I should be today. Right. Or maybe I'm at the end of the shift and I'm a little tired because I went out last night, and now, all these different factors, right, kind of come into play when you look at those passive solutions and them only taking you so far, as you pointed out. But when you bring that tech into place and, help those operators to make better decisions, give them better like real-time visual cues and things like that. I mean, it really makes a big difference in going towards and achieving that 100% safety, metric and having no incidents, right? And I think that's a big leap from the passive, adding that tech in there. So tell us a little bit about, from the tech side, I mean, tell us a little bit about Elokon's offerings and how they're helping to improve the overall safety around material handling equipment or forklifts.
Sure. So broadly speaking, we have, three products in the market today. I won't bore you with all the various capabilities, but one point I want to pick up on, and I will come back to it. Sure. You mentioned something I think was really important. Whether it's a fork truck operator or somebody in a warehouse distribution center, I mean, 99.9% of them are very professional, but we are all human. We will make a mistake. That's just the nature of who we are, right? Whether we're, as you say, out late the night before, or after a 10, 12-hour shift, things can get a little bit, complacent with the word you used. So one product we have, for example, is called Elo Shield. It's to do with proximity detection, and it can detect whether it's another fork truck in the vicinity, or a pedestrian, or a piece of equipment, for example. The whole idea behind it, if you can provide that operator, let's say a fork truck operator, a little bit more time and a little bit more notification, really, that he or she is approaching an area that could be, I don't want to use the word dangerous, but could have something or somebody that he doesn't or she doesn't expect in the vicinity. If we can bring that information in, as you said, real time to the operator and also to the pedestrian, for example, in this example, they can make better informed decisions. That's really what it comes down to. We're not going to take away control of the fork truck from that operator. He or she still owns and controls that piece of equipment, has to, because we don't know whether it's loaded, unloaded. We don't know enough about the environment in which it's working.
Yeah. But
if we can give those individuals a little bit more notification of that something is, unusual, there is something or somebody maybe around the corner that they can't see, or behind them, or in the vicinity, and alert them to that concern, then they can make a better informed decision and significantly reduce the likelihood of an event. Now, whether that event is just a near miss or something more significant, the upside to that is that, people come into the office or come into the warehouse, they want to come in with 10 fingers and 10 toes, and they need to leave with the same quantity. And anything we can do to improve and drive that on a daily, weekly, hourly basis and really push that, envelope is really what we are all about at Elokon. So that's just one example on a product we call Elo Shield, which, as I say, it's all to do with proximity detection. What's around me? Is it something that I should be aware of? And if so, bring that to my attention, both the operator and, for example, a pedestrian. We have another system which we call Elo Fleet, which is all to do with fleet management. So it monitors, measures the fork trucks and the operators on those fork trucks, and basically it does the three things. It's access control, which really makes sure that only trained, authorized, certified operators can use a piece of equipment. I had a conversation, I won't mention names, but I had a conversation about 10 days or so ago from a company. They had 237 fork trucks in their operation. Every one of them is unsecured. There's keys in every one of them. So theoretically, and this is maybe taking it to the extreme, but every one of them could be, you and I could walk into that warehouse potentially, jump on a fork truck, turn it on, and drive it. And we may never have driven a fork truck in the past, right? Now that's pretty rare, but having access control, making sure that if you did go into a warehouse, or I did, and we tried to jump on a fork truck, it would not start because we're not authorized to utilize that piece of equipment. That's the first measure. Second measure is then, okay, having authorized, and I'll use me in this example, I'm allowed to use it, I'm trained and certified, make me do a checklist. Make sure that that piece of equipment is safe to operate. Take a couple of minutes, and without getting into that official regulations over here in North America, that's a requirement, generally speaking. And then monitor how that piece of equipment is being used. Is it being driven, I don't want to say unsafely, but maybe a little irrationally on occasions? Is it going a little too fast? Is it hitting things, impact management and all that kind of stuff? Key point of that is you can collect all that information, but you really have to make it available in a way that makes sense to team leaders, managers, supervisors, whatever the term is, so that they can have really keep an eye. And I don't mean big brother, but keep an eye on what's going on in the operation. So if events are starting to occur, they can take some action. And it may be a quiet conversation over coffee just to remind people that safety is important. It could be a performance improvement plan. It could be a retraining plan, whatever the case may be. You won't get that from a passive system because there's no way of reporting the data back. That's the key point. You can collect all the information, but what do you do with it to make things better tomorrow, next week, next month, right? What are the goals and objectives? And how can the system and the data it collects help a company to achieve those goals and objectives.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's so important, not just from a safety perspective, but just in general. I mean, you collect all that data, and there's so much data just floating around within a warehouse fulfillment operation. And I mean, how do you? It's one thing to collect it, but like, how do you take action on that? How do you use that to leverage to make better decisions? I think that's so important, and that it kind of goes back to. You mentioned in there the near miss, which I think is such an important thing to talk about and capture, because in regular without like tech involved and things like that, I mean, there's so many near misses that just go unreported, right, or unrecorded. And a lot of times I think people in the mindset who are operating don't necessarily maybe think about it as a near miss, because nothing happened, right? So everything's okay. So, but if you're capturing that data from a tech perspective, then you're able to kind of take that and be able to make decisions based on that, right? I mean, say like, you're getting a lot of near misses at this intersection, right? Well, there's probably something wrong with that intersection, right? We could probably make something better at that intersection to be able to prevent that, because it's only inevitable if you have multiple near misses that one of them is going to be, it's not going to be a miss, right? It's going to be a hit or something, right? It's going to be an accident. So I mean, I think that's super important to understand. And it's great that you're able to capture those touch points and help the operator to make better decisions. And it's also great too, you point out the pedestrians. I mean, to be able to also protect them as well, because you don't know, a pedestrian maybe is distracted, and not every forklift has the best range of visibility, right, with masts and everything in the way, and maybe that pedestrian gets lost in the mast as you're turning or something, and then the pedestrian is looking somewhere else. And to be able to have those things kind of capture that and help to prevent those things, I think is so big. So I think it's super important to see how that tech is coming into play and being able to make the warehouse a safer place. So I wanted to touch on, because I think that a lot of times, like, I mean, I guess this goes kind of hand in hand with the near miss discussion. You have these near misses, and sometimes they don't get reported, they don't get recorded. But if those were to happen, then they can be quite costly. But if you haven't had any big safety incidents or safety issues, it might be hard to figure out and justify spend in some type of tech focused solution for safety, or some type of system to help with your safety. So how do you kind of navigate and go about that with potential customers, how to kind of work out ROI for these types of systems, and kind of point out why the upfront spend is going to play out and benefit in the long run?
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
The return on investment, the ROI, is a challenge. I mean, I'll be perfectly frank with you. How do you say to somebody, well, you haven't had an incident at this point, so go and spend 50 grand, 100 grand, just in case? They're going to come back and say, well, that seems like a little unnecessary.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a number of ways of that we maybe overcome that with a potential customer. There's proof of the pudding, right? Put a system in, be it a 5-10 unit pilot, for want of a better term. Put it in for 30, 60, 90 days. Have a look at the system, look at the data it's collecting, get some feedback from the operators and the pedestrians if that's appropriate, and get their feedback, which I think is vitally important. Safety has to be from the top to the bottom and from the bottom to the top. If it isn't, then there's a weakness in that area. So we put trials and tests and systems in for pilots. And I would say, probably 8 out of 10 times we're successful in that, because the proof of the pudding is vitally important. There's case studies and networking. So, for example, we might be talking to a company today or in the near future that has a similar operation or a similar characteristic to one of our previous customers or existing customers, and we'll try and connect those two. Because if they're talking to me or my team, the sales team, obviously we want them to buy the system. We're not going to force it upon them, but we want them to do so. But if they can talk to somebody that's gone through that learning curve and hopefully seen the benefits, it's a great deal more credible to them to hear it from an independent third party and not just us.
Yeah. That
has enormous benefits. I think there's a great deal that companies can learn from other companies. And I don't mean giving away secrets, but when it comes to safety, everybody should be sharing everything, the best practices, whatever the case may be. What's worked, and equally importantly, what hasn't worked and why. What did they find? What was wrong with the system, if anything? Was it the way they implemented it? Was it the way they managed it and reported the data? And there's lots of reasons why things are successful and things are not as successful as we hope them to be. Another way of looking at it is it's a bit like having an insurance policy. It's something you hope you never have to use.
Right.
But the cost of not having it can be, enormous. I mean, you see some of the over-the-road, incidents, and they're starting, I hate to say it, but they're starting to happen inside the warehouse and, inside the manufacturing. We're not talking of, $5,000, $10,000, which is still a big chunk of money.
Yeah.
We're talking hundreds of thousands, if not potentially millions. And companies need to be aware of the liability that they may be, held accountable for if they don't do, whether it's our system or somebody else, but if they don't do something to help improve and drive safety. So there's not really one answer. I mean, there may be 3 or 4 different ways of approaching it.
Yeah.
What we've found is that, as I said before, probably 80% of the time we work with a customer or a prospect and put a system in, a pilot, they more often than not will come back to us and say, it did everything we said it was going to do. We pride ourselves on credibility. We try not to, we don't want to push the envelope. We help them understand what it can do, how best it can achieve those goals. And we'll be equally candid and say, it's not going to answer everything. If you have an operator, God forbid, or a pedestrian that does something stupid, it's not going to stop that from happening. There isn't, I don't think, a tech in the world today. We're looking at artificial intelligence and machine learning and other things to really try and push that boundary.
Yeah.
But if somebody wants to do something, you mentioned it earlier on, you get in your car, you got a rear view camera on it, and you just keep going backwards until you hit the post. The car can beep and do all the things you want it to do. You still hit the post, right, or the other car. But you got to give everybody the opportunity. And the one thing I will also add to that, warehouses are not getting any slower, right? Everybody's being asked to do more. More in, more out, quicker velocity throughout. Adding to that, AGVs and robotics and other things that are being in there sort of, adds a lot more complication and or complexity. If we can give that human a little bit more information in a timely manner so that he or she can make, as I said before, a better informed decision, the likelihood is you will get to or close to a 0 incident operation. That's all we can, that's the goal, ultimate goal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such a good point. The more information you can give them and the more awareness you can give them too of what's happening around them or what potentially is going on, then, the better decision they can make, which is going to result in decreased safety incidents and hopefully ultimately 0 safety incidents, right? And I think it's so important to highlight that. And I think it's such a great thing to see. And, I think, you have a very good point there. I mean, it's hard to sometimes see or justify that, like, if you haven't had a major safety incident, like, why am I going to spend, right? But it is very much like insurance. And like you said, I mean, one little bad move by a forklift operator hitting a rack could result in millions of dollars of damage. I mean, it's not only from a the human element, right, that's involved, like, potential injury and, in some cases, unfortunately, death too could be potentially out there, but then also, overall inventory destruction and, total cleanup and all these things. I mean, it just kind of grows and grows and grows on itself, right? I mean, one little bad move can be, like a huge undertaking to deal with and come up with the recovery cost and all those things. So it's great to be able to put those in kind of perspective and justify that preventative spend to be able to make sure you don't have to cross that bridge and figure out, when it's too late that, this would have paid for itself already, right? So I mean, very interesting perspectives there, and I'm curious, as we kind of wrap up the conversation here, as we look to the future specifically around safety tech. I'm curious, like what is exciting for you in the safety tech space, and what do you think is exciting that could potentially develop within the safety space?
Well, we're looking at a number of different technologies. I touched on some of it a little earlier with regard to artificial intelligence and machine learning. I don't know you can pick up a newspaper or look online anymore without seeing AI in some form or other. Right. And I'm not talking about using it to take people's jobs away. That's not the intention. The intention is, computers are getting, when I say computers, I don't mean Dell laptops and others, but the microprocessors and such like are getting smaller and more powerful and less expensive over time. Moore's law is the key. If we can put more and more of that into use in a way that makes sense by using, for example, AI and sensors like LiDAR and radar and others, heat sensors and various others that we can incorporate into an overall system, the likelihood of providing a great deal more capability at the end point, i.e. where the rubber hits the road or the warehouse, can only drive safety as well as productivity and efficiency. I mean, and that's a challenge that many companies, ourselves and our customers face is, okay, I want to be as safe as possible. That's a goal that everybody has, let's be clear. Right. But I also need to be efficient. Now, if I have an awful lot of false alarms, for example, my efficiency drops, and therefore the belief in the system can drop. So we've got to try and make these things, as I said before, work in the operation that they need to work in. Miniaturization, getting things smaller, lighter, cheaper, much more effective, much more able to do what we say we're going to do. I think AI and machine learning is something we've been looking at for probably 9 months to a year now, and we're looking to bring some of that technology to the market. Mm-hmm. I mean, throwing tech out there is not necessarily the answer. We've never really been a company that just says, here's some tech, let's see how it works, right? We try and really take a focused approach, a methodical approach on how can it be deployed and what benefit is it going to bring? Are we going to collect more data than is worthwhile? Are we going to be able to utilize that information in a way that makes sense, gets back to all that kind of stuff? Dashboards and all the other things. So we take a really sort of, holistic view on much of this technology. I think the combination of a number of different sensors, I mentioned LiDAR, that's something we've been looking at and bringing out some products later this year, early next, that can really start looking at not just, are you a person, but what are you doing? Where are you? Is there a pallet in the way? All those little things that can make a big difference. And I think the key point, I didn't mention earlier on, is that we are an OEM independent company. So our technology can be applied to really, I say nearly any, MHE out there. So you don't have to buy a brand new XYZ product from one OEM. If you've got a fork truck that's 2, 3, 4 years old and it's perfectly serviceable, and you're going to keep it for another 3 or 4 or 5 years, there's technology out there that can be applied to that, that fork truck in an aftermarket sense, which can save a significant amount of money and still provide that return on investment that you mentioned earlier on.
Yeah, I think that's such a great thing too. I mean, to be able to utilize it on any kind of material handling equipment, as you mentioned there, and have that flexibility, I think is such a key thing for adoption, right? To be able to make it easier and that barrier to entry lower as well.
Right.
And I also think it's great that you're focusing on that AI ML piece too as well, because like we said earlier, I mean, there's so much data that's being generated, right? And there's so many data points that you can capture too from a safety perspective, that being able to speed up the understanding and the processing of that, and even potentially having like actionable insights delivered to you around that is such a great thing, I think, for the industry will be as that develops too. So very interesting stuff with you here, Mark, and really appreciate you coming on and talking about this topic. I think it's very, very important, as we emphasized multiple times here. I think it should be top of mind for everybody within a warehouse setting, and should be a main focus as the overall goal, to make sure, as you said earlier, come in with 10 toes, 10 fingers, and leave with 10 toes and 10 fingers, right? I mean, that's the way to go. So really appreciate you coming on here, Mark. And if people are interested in learning more about Elokon Group, what's the best way to do that?
Probably best to go to the website, www.elokon, that's elokon.com. And all the product information is up there, and contact us forms and various other things as you'd expect. Mm-hmm. I want to say thanks for the invitation. As I said before, I enjoyed the conversation, and hopefully you found it informative, and your viewers and will do the same.
Absolutely. And always love talking safety in the warehouse. So Mark, thank you very much for coming on here. And we'll definitely put all the information about Elokon at thenewwarehouse.com as well, so people can easily find it. So thank you once again for your insights on the show today.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.